Joining us now, as he does every week, senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, whose weekly segment is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, Greg, the passing game just got a shot in the arm this week with the acquisition of Amari Cooper. For Bills fans that might not be wholly familiar with his game, why don't you break him down for them and where maybe he excels as a receiver most?
Well, of course, I knew you would ask me that, Brownie. So let's put it in the context of the Bills, because that's the critical piece here. I remember being at the Combine a couple of years ago and having a great conversation with a veteran wide receiver coach in the league who said to me, and as soon as he said it, of course, it resonated because I watched tape of all teams. He said it's really hard to have a consistent and good passing game in this league without a boundary X receiver. And by that, it means that when you line up in a 3-by-1 set and you have the single receiver to the short side of the field, that's the boundary X receiver. That receiver very often in this league now gets single coverage, man-to-man coverage. And if you don't have a receiver who can win versus man-to-man coverage at that boundary X, it's very hard to have a really good pass game. It's very limiting. And obviously they drafted Keon Coleman with the idea that down the road he could become that guy because of his size and his traits, but he's not there yet. So they don't really have that guy, and it really presents major limitations for what you can do in a pass game. Amari Cooper is that guy. He's big. He can run. He can run in breaking routes. He has vertical ability. So now you have the ability to line up in 3-by-1 sets with a true boundary X receiver who gives you that dimension to your offense. And I think that's a really critical piece because I think we would all agree that the pass game has been somewhat handicapped and hamstrung by the fact that they didn't have sort of that guy.
What does that do to the defense, having that guy sitting over there?
Well, you have to decide, number one, depending on who you're playing, if you have a corner that can match up to a man-to-man, or if you need a safety that has to be part of that coverage, Steve. And you know, I know you know all this. We're letting the audience know. So if you feel that you need a safety to be part of that, then you've got three receivers to the other side where there's technically less people that are available, because a lot of teams, what they do now, if they feel they have a really good corner who can match up to your boundary X, they take that boundary safety and he becomes part of the coverage to the trip side of the formation. And that adds another body and makes it a little tougher to work that side. So the hope is, of course, that Cooper, being what he is, big, can run in breakers, can run vertically, can pretty much do anything as a receiver, that he demands that defenses change the way they play. And then the hope, of course, becomes, if they do, that on the other side, the trip side, that the Kincaids can become even a bigger factor, Shakir, that these guys can become a bigger factor because of the coverage.
What about, I kind of want to get back to what worked for the Bills last week in the Monday night game against the Jets, and that was obviously their run game and setting a physical tone early.
Yeah.
And Ray Davis was fantastic on that first drive and for most of the game after that. But here's the question. That all looked great. Controlling the line of scrimmage, I mean, it was as physically dominant as we've seen Buffalo's offensive line in the run game, maybe since the Dallas game last year. But how sustainable is that on a week-to-week basis? And I say that knowing that there's going to be two pretty formidable defensive tackles this week in T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Sims.
Yes. I mean, you obviously want to run the ball. The Bills have probably run it in some ways more than, I don't want to say more than they want. I don't know what their plan is. But I think the passing game has really not been what they expected through the early part of this season, through 6 games. And they're going to need more from the pass game. And last week I talked about the fact that I thought schematically they needed more, and I still believe that based on tape study. Now, when you do get a Cooper, maybe you can win some one-on-one matchups against man coverage, and maybe Josh feels more comfortable throwing him the ball than he might other receivers because of who Cooper's been in the league and the success that he has had. But I think this pass game needs much more to it for this offense to be really what ideally it can be. Yes, you want to be able to run the ball. but not every week are you going to come out and run the ball the way they did on that first series, where I think 8 of the 9 plays were
Yeah.
running plays.
Right.
So
That's not going to happen every week.
all right, so let me follow that up with this, because going into that game, the Bills were a 61% run team on 1st and 10, which was a sharp departure from what it was under Dayball and Dorsey when they were up amongst the league leaders in pass rate on 1st down. Does Cooper impact that tendency at all? Do we get closer to 50-50, or do you think that Joe Brady is what he is because they were 52% run last year when he took over as interim?
Yeah. I mean, clearly that's a Joe Brady question, but I don't know the answer to that, and I'm just being honest. But the bottom line is they're going to need more from their passing game within structure than they're getting right now. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen can make special plays. I mean, the 42-yard play to Davis last week that's a snapshot of Allen. I mean, he had Shakir wide open on the sit route at 5 yards. Now it's 2nd and 10, and maybe Josh feels like I'm not throwing a 5-yard ball on 2nd and 10. He's the only one who could tell you that. But Shakir was wide open and probably could have turned it up and gotten a 1st down. So he leaves the pocket and makes the incredible throw. And make no mistake, that was a ridiculous throw. But even the first play of the second half where he hits Samuel, he leaves the pocket. It becomes a second reaction play. He's great at those, but it's hard to live on that foundationally. The offense, the passing game needs more of a structured week-to-week feel to it in order to work.
And if you get this guy, Amari Cooper, Shakir comes back and is fully healthy. Basically, what it sounds like is Cooper will help him get a little more separation. Certainly, Shakir getting back in gives them one more option, particularly in the short to intermediate. But one of the things they've been criticized for is not being able to really push the ball down the field. I mean, obviously you're talking, the play to Ray Davis does not count as pushing the ball down the field. That's an off-the-cuff play. I'm talking about, the 15-yard dig route or the comeback route on the outside the numbers. What is keeping the Bills from having those kind of plays in their offense? If you can tell.
Well, that's what I spoke about last week, and I think it still holds, is schematically, I don't see a lot of that from a route structure standpoint. And then you still have the Josh Allen factor. I mean, Josh this year, I think a little too often has crossed the line from playing within structure, dropping back, hitting his back foot, throwing it to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw, which when all's said and done is what quarterback is. And I think he's crossed that line a little too much where he leaves the pocket prematurely and then he leaves the structure of plays on the field. So, we all tend, because he's arguably the best in the league and making the Ray Davis plays or the Johnson plays against, I think it might have been, I forget who that was against when he threw it down to the 1-yard line. I think Miami.
Jacksonville, I think.
Miami.
Or Miami, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was Miami. He's going to make those plays. But you really would like your offense, your pass game, to really play within the structure. That's the way it's coached. That's the way it's taught. To develop any consistency in your pass game, that has to happen. And that's not happening enough. So I think, and it's not a matter of blame, it's just a matter of what I see on tape. I'd love to see better structure of routes to present more clearly defined reads and throws for Josh. And I think Josh has to do a better job of staying within the structure of that when the pocket is relatively clean.
Let's flip it over to Buffalo's defense, facing an offense that's got some issues right now, to say the least.
Just to say the least.
To turn the ball, turning the ball over at a high rate, and also literally no efficiency in the passing game whatsoever. No. I mean, Will Levis throws for 95 yards last week, and it's such a head scratcher for me, Greg, when you have household names in the receiving corps like DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and Calvin Ridley. Like, what's going on there?
Well, they crossed the line last week from trying to help a young quarterback that the Bears are doing with Caleb Williams, the Commanders are doing with Jaden Daniels in terms of what they call. They crossed the line from helping to protecting. And you can't play in this league when you're trying to protect your quarterback. It's almost as if they were trying to hide their quarterback. You can't play like that. And again, I'm not questioning what they do. They're with him every day. They're with their people every day. I'm just telling you what the film shows. So it's very difficult for them to play any kind of meaningful offense if that's the way they're going to play. Their run game was pretty good last week. Tony Pollard's a nice back. Their O-line has some youth to it. And, when you're trying to build an O-line, you really would love to run the ball and be able to let them play forward and proactively rather than reactively in pass protection, which they've struggled with at times this year. So we really don't know what we're going to get from their offense. The only thing I would say is Levis is a big-armed kid, and every once in a while, even now while he's struggling, he can make some throws. He's capable of making any throw at any time, so he's dangerous, but they're really struggling on offense. If last week is any indication, coming up to Buffalo, a better team than they played last week, at home at Buffalo, they're going to probably try to protect them again, I would think.
Well, and you mentioned their run game for a moment, and obviously from the struggles that Levis is having, I mean, they really don't do anything that they can hang their hat on offensively, except lean on their defense.
Which is pretty good, by the way.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. Their defense is pretty good. Brownie already mentioned their 2 D tackles. I mean, Simmons is a man and a half. And you can just look at individual plays, which maybe you guys have done, where he is just physically dominant. And T'Vondre Sweat, he's come in from day one, and he is a big, big man with incredibly light feet. So they're really good at the D tackle position. They can rush the quarterback at times. They're not phenomenal at it, but, with Key and with Landry, they can rush the quarterback. They've got 2 big linebackers who can run. Both those guys are 6'2", 6'3", 245-ish. That's Murray and Jones I'm speaking about. They play a lot of press on the outside. They've got 2 veteran safeties who are solid players. This is a good defense. Obviously, when your offense doesn't score, what happens is every play becomes magnified, and one poor defensive play, and by the way, we know every team has more than one poor defensive play every game, but if your defense is scoring, those plays just become plays. When you're not scoring at all, those plays become magnified.
Right. And as good as the Titans' defense has been, the one thing they haven't done is take the ball away and force turnovers,
Correct.
And that's given no help to the offense in terms of giving them extra possessions. Would you be shocked if the Bills' defensive game plan is basically neutralize Pollard and put it on Levis? I mean, can it be that simple?
Yeah, I mean, you're theoretically, abstractly, yes. Yes. That's definitely going to be the plan here. And, hope you get into a lot of 3rd and 8s, and then you rush the quarterback against a rookie left tackle, who I like a lot, Latham, but he's had some issues in pass pro. And last week they started a right tackle, Leroy Watson, who was a tight end in college and who just made the transition to tackle in the NFL, was a free agent and made his first NFL start, and clearly struggled in pass protection.
Yeah, I think Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to be back this week, I think.
Well, I think he was benched, not hurt. So we'll see.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was.
I think. I
Okay.
mean, is it possible he has an injury and they kind of, use that? But
Yeah.
I think he was benched, but I could be wrong.
Wow, benched for a guy that hasn't played tackle before? How bad is it? Good Lord.
It's been real. Their O-line and pass protections had a hard time.
Yeah, I know. They've given up 16 sacks already this year.
And
in
Levis
5
doesn't help, Brownie, because Levis is a guy that gets stuck in the pocket a lot and holds the ball. He's one of those guys, because necessarily see it as clearly as he needs to. The term I always use, I know people use processing. I always talk about elimination and isolation, being able to eliminate what's not there and isolate where to go with the ball within the timing and structure. He tends to be a couple of beats slow at times with that, and therefore gets stuck in the pocket.
Yeah, so I know. So he's a young quarterback. He's obviously very gifted. If you see him just to the surface, he reminds you of Josh Allen, big, strong, athletic type of guy with a big arm.
Yeah.
But obviously, Josh's development, you could see it in increments. And Brownie and I sat here for a year and a half watching Josh take these steps. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. He wouldn't do this other. What is, if you're watching Will Levis for the first time, or maybe if you've watched him a lot, Are there any baby steps that you've seen him take?
Well, yeah, I just mentioned the elimination and isolation. That has to get better. That can get better, of course, with experience when you just feel more confident in what you're looking at. Another issue with him, though, and again, we felt this is what a lot of people felt about Josh Allen when he came out of Wyoming, by the way. But his ball location is very erratic. He does have scatter shot tendencies. That pops up too often on tape. But as I said, for coming out of Wyoming and for the first year in the league or so, a lot of people thought that was a major issue with Josh. And obviously he's cleaned that up, which is still a surprise to many people because very often guys who are erratic and scattershot, that doesn't change. Josh Allen, in some ways, in that regard, is kind of a unicorn, kind of different than most. Most guys don't improve their accuracy dramatically.
Last one from me, Greg. It was kind of our shared opinion that Taylor Rapp may have had his best game in a Bills uniform last week, and just the return of him and Taron Johnson on the back end, What a difference.
Yeah, no, I thought that Rapp played really, really well. I thought he played with incredible awareness and intelligence. He's a good football player. And Johnson, the thing that always we've talked about him through the years because he's been such a good player, and we know that they're a nickel defense. I mean, now they play some dime, obviously, in certain situations, but at their core, they're a nickel defense. The thing that always stands out to me about Johnson is how good he is in the run game. And that's the reason they can play the nickel defense, because he will fill in. He'll even get into the B gap in the run game, which normally you do not want your slot corner to have to be a B gap defender in the run game. But because he's so good, the Bills ask him to do that at times, and he's really competitive, tenacious.
Yeah, we got caught. In some of the stuff that teams are doing to the Bills is pulling that offensive lineman around to the weak side, to the slot side where he's at, and try and get an offensive lineman matched up on him. The problem is if they get that lineman matched up in space, he can't make enough contact to take Taron out of the play. Last week, the Jets did a nicer job. They got him up in traffic, and Taron had to take the offensive lineman on low and got a penalty for a low block.
So there's still, that play, yes.
Yeah, there's still some gamesmanship going on, trying to get him matched up in a spot with, one, a guy who can block him, and two, without enough space that Taron can't jump around it and still get back in to make the play.
Right, but he's a really good football player.
Yes, he is.
And I think, you're in the building, so Brownie, I don't know, when you talk to the coaches, but it seems to me that incrementally Dorian Williams is getting better too. So obviously Bernard is a really good football player, but, just watching the tape without being there every day, I feel like Williams is getting better.
Yeah, and we actually took a call on this today, but we haven't seen a lot of that pre-snap A-gap lining up with him or Bernard. They haven't really blitzed a whole lot this year, so we haven't seen much of that. And I'm wondering when they'll turn to that or when they feel they need to turn to that. Probably not this week by the state of the pass protection that you're describing here. And you were right. Petit Frere was benched. I'm just curious who they're going to start at right tackle now. It could be one of three different guys. It could be Petit Frere, could be Jalen Duncan, could be Leroy Watson. It doesn't sound like any of them have been anything to write home about, though.
Yeah, no, it's Watson last week, and I think he played every snap. And while he was okay in the run game, he clearly had issues in pass protection.
A.J. Epinesa is coming off a 2-sack game last week. Should have been 3 with the ridiculous roughing the passer penalty that he got called for. He should have had 3 sacks.
And you know what? Besides just the sacks, I thought those rushes were really good. The way that he played off contact, used his hands really well. I mean, he was not going against a stiff left tackle. That was Tyron Smith.
Yeah, he had a nice week. So he may double down again this week. And it looks like Ed Oliver is going to be back too. So look out, Tennessee O-line. My goodness. Greg, thanks for the time as always. I'm sure we'll review what Cooper does this week, next week with you.
I sure hope so. And, guys, though, you can't take these games for granted. You can't assume this is a victory because it's Tennessee. You can't do that in this league.
Brownie and I aren't doing it. We're not doing that.
You know how it works, Steve. You played. You know how that works.
Right. All it takes sometimes just stand up and take a deep breath and you lose. You gotta keep your head down.
All right, thanks, Greg. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks.